Britney Spears is single, gentlemen, but I know that's why you didn't tune in, even though it is a great fact. We're going to talk all about football, something that most people in this area probably care about more than that fact, even the high school boys. I know it sounds crazy, folks, but listen, we're going to give you a great show tonight. We've got the playoff picture. We're going to talk all about who's going to beat who. We're going to guru for you. You don't even have to go to the games. We're going to tell you who's going to win those games. Folks, stay with us here on the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm BJ Kubarulis of the Connection newspapers. Of course, my co-hosts are Paul Frummelt and Mirza Krispahich, also of the Connection newspapers. Before we get to all that exciting news, we also have a guest that's going to be joining us tonight, Stonebridge coach Mickey Thompson, who has built a powerhouse program in the Loudoun area and has since dominated Liberty from coming over to AAA in the last 2 years, is going to be joining us here tonight on the Fairfax Sports Report. Before we get to that, want to thank the folks, of course, that make this show possible. Of course, we're talking about our underwriters. CCI Screen Printing, for all your screen printing needs. They're one of our teammates, 703-978-0257. And Quality Care Ford Service Center, another teammate of ours, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. Okay, folks, so you've tuned in for an incredible show of football. We're going to give you everything you need to know. We're going to tell you who made the playoffs in football. We're also going to tell you who would have made the playoffs if next year's format was in play this year. And of course, we're talking about an 8-team playoff format in 2 divisions, 16 teams. So stay tuned for that and Coach Mickey Thompson. Of course, we want to give you a couple of news and notes before we get to that. Mike Spooner of West Springfield High School, Mirza, won the boys cross-country meet at state level.
Exactly. Spooner just a week ago won his second consecutive Northern Region title, and he was the favorite into this going into the meet on Saturday. And of course, like you said, he went ahead and took it as he was supposed to and got that first state title. Another favorite was Sarah Hadiji of Woodson High School. Unfortunately, Sarah ended up spraining her ankle halfway through the race, and she had to be carted off. She couldn't finish the race.
Wow.
Yeah. While we're talking about Woodson, though,
Right.
I wanted to bring up a couple of news and notes there. Dan Chikowski, the DSA over at Woodson, announced that he has hired 2 coaches. One is Matt Liva, who will be replacing Dave Noyes at the soccer coach position. Matt was an assistant coach last year with the Cavaliers, who of course went on to the state tournament.
Right.
And the other one is Michael Jeffrey, who was an assistant wrestling coach last year, and he's going to take over as a head coach this year.
So some folks moving up in the coaching ranks over at Woodson High School. Dan Chikowski bringing in 2 coaches that he's hoping is going to help those programs stay at the good level that they've been at, of course, at the state level last year. Speaking of the state level, we have the field hockey results. Also a bracket that we showed you last week wasn't quite complete because, of course, the games hadn't been played. We previewed some games with Coach Terry Toll from Westfield. We have that completed field hockey bracket, and we can tell you guys at home there watching who won the tournament was, of course, my alma mater, Cox High School from Virginia Beach. Their 14th state title, not a consecutive streak, but 14th title for the Falcons over at Cox High School. Mirza, you got to see some of the field hockey at the state level at Oakton High School, who sponsored the event this year. What did you see out of some of these teams we see here up on our screen?
I got a chance to see the great game between Stafford and Woodson in the first round, and Stafford went on to win the game 3-1, but Woodson came out really strong, taking the lead in the 15th second of the game.
Wow.
I mean, Stafford didn't even touch the ball, and this is a defending state champion, and Stafford, who, after the win, of course, went on to win their 46th consecutive game in a row before facing Cox in the next round and losing.
Wow.
Woodson, like we said, went out 15 seconds into the game, 1-0 lead. They dropped, couldn't defend really well. 5 minutes later, it was 1-1, and from then on, Stafford really dominated. Of course, this was the last game for Coach Andy Moyer at Woodson, who's spent 12 years coaching there. As we all know, last year he tried to step down. They didn't find a suitable replacement. He said, "I'll do it." Showed some unselfishness there. He took the Cavaliers to 5 straight state tournaments, and that's just a credit to him as a coach that year after year he was able to do so.
Andy Moore definitely had some success over at Woodson. Of course, he's also in the assistant director of student activities role, something that we know he's going to be doing quite well at and has been for quite some time. Of course, he also has some kids that he wants to see play some athletics in their youth, and so he wants to be a dad, something we're finding a lot of coaches in this area that are choosing to be parents over coaches, and that's something we could certainly understand. Of course, Paul, volleyball is something that you got a chance to see a lot of this year. You are a resident volleyball expert, and the region tournament just wrapped up at Centerville High School. We have a bracket from the finals of the region tournament. We had a couple of teams advance to the state level of competition. Paul, take it away for the Northern Region Volleyball Tournament.
You see Lee and Herndon, Lee advancing from there. Westfield Stonebridge, the Bulldogs beating the Bulldogs and going into the semifinals. From Lee, Westfield went ahead and beat Lee. Lee, the only non-Concord team left in the Northern Region semifinals. Westfield went ahead and beat Lee. We go ahead and look at the lower bracket. We'll see that Chantilly and West Springfield played. Chantilly beating West Springfield, Langley beating Centerville, seeing there's two other Concord teams. And Chantilly, actually, I was talking with senior hitter Heather Borowski, and she said, we were the fourth seed from the Concord, and we're actually now the fourth seed in the Northern Region.
Right.
So obviously the Concord definitely dominating, and Centerville beating Chantilly to make it to the finals. Westfield taking out Centerville in a 3-game sweep to win the Northern Region Volleyball Finals.
Wow, so it was all a Sully area volleyball tournament, and I saw Langley down there at the bottom, a team that finished the regular season undefeated, then lost to Stonebridge in the Liberty District Final. That was a team that a lot of people thought had state tournament written all over them, and of course they fell a little bit short.
Yeah, it was Langley and Stonebridge, two heavily heralded teams from the Liberty District. Both didn't even make the semifinals. Big surprise. Very Concord-driven Northern Region.
Well, speaking of a Concord-driven Northern Region, there was another coach over at Stonebridge High School that has something to say about that, because he's driving the Northern Region outside of the Northern Region. Coach Mickey Thompson from Stonebridge is a coach that has driven that football team to several titles. We're going to have a graphic that we're going to show you folks at home once we get Coach Thompson on the phone here. And he's going to be joining us, and he's going to tell us, 2 district titles in the Liberty in the last 2 years, coming over from the AA part of town over there in Loudon, where they did dominate the Dulles District for quite some time. Coach Thompson, are you with us? Okay, we're going to be getting Coach Thompson on the phone in the next couple of minutes. Hang on there, folks. We're going to be bringing you his expertise. But, Paul, you've gotten a chance to see the Stonebridge Bulldogs, and they're the team right now, the class of the Liberty District, and some people would say they might be able to even challenge a Division VI team like a Westfield. They're the 2 undefeated teams. In your opinion, having seen both, who's a better team?
For dominating their area, I believe that Stonebridge is the better team in Division V. You say Division VI, that's a whole other animal. Definitely in Division V, Stonebridge is the cream of the crop, and they have pretty much dominated everybody from the Liberty District all the way through, and it'd be great to see a Bulldog on Bulldog fight. It's something we're not going to see, but Division V, Division VI, Stonebridge is definitely the top of Division V and could give most teams in Division VI a run for their money.
And the Stonebridge Bulldogs are a team that has risen kind of from the depths of the Dulles District. They first started out there. They were a new school. Of course, Loudon has been sprouting new schools for quite some time. And of course, we're here in the Northern Region and the Fairfax County part of town, and not a lot of people have gotten to understand really what Stonebridge has accomplished in their time before they came over to the Liberty District. Stonebridge is a team that really put itself on the map a couple of years back when they beat Parkview in an overtime game. I was at that game, and that was kind of what put Stonebridge on the map in the Dulles District, at least. They won a couple of titles over there before coming over to the Liberty. The Liberty District, of course, has been one that they have dominated since coming over. 2 consecutive Liberty District titles, and of course, a little later in the show, we're going to get a chance to show you a graphic about the Northern Region's coaches and where Coach Mickey Thompson sits on that list. And I think some people in this area will be surprised with some of the good coaches that we have in our area, just exactly where he sits on that list.
The people in the Northern Region, when they hear or see Stonebridge, 2-year-old team, they think, who are these young bucks? But they've been around in the Dulles District, dominating the Dulles District. They deserve to be in AAA, and they're showing why.
Yes, absolutely. And some people think that Stonebridge is a team. Obviously, they have a guy over there in Devin Brown that was the Liberty District Player of the Year from the reports that we've gotten. He's a guy that is 27 touchdowns this year. We'll get into some of his numbers later. But Devin Brown is definitely a guy that transferred to Stonebridge after not returning to O'Connell and has changed the shape of the Northern Region for having done so. But I think Stonebridge would have been pretty fine without him, having Terrence Glenn at quarterback.
I believe so. You have Terrence Glenn, obviously a great quarterback, great with the arm, great with the run. Notre Dame recruit Andrew Nuss leading that offensive line. When I talked to Coach Thompson earlier in the week, he said his defensive line, the front three, are really showing up now as it gets on. So you get two great lines. Glenn behind center. Well, Glenn back there. They don't really go behind center. And then that with Walu there, they're pretty much unstoppable.
Okay, folks at home, I know this is the moment you've been waiting for to hear the expertise and from Coach Mickey Thompson from Stonebridge. Not a lot of people can relate to the Loudoun part of town here in the northern region. Coach, thanks for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report.
Thanks for having me.
So, Coach Thompson, of course, in the last 2 years, you've really kind of kicked the door down and busted into this northern region and dominated the Liberty District. Talk a little bit about the expectations you had for coming into this district and this region, and obviously you guys having some success going all the way to the Division V state title game last year. Were your expectations met, or were you surprised?
I was very surprised. We were very lucky last year. We played a lot of close games, and I don't think we dominated anybody. And we were just lucky that we were able to make plays at the end of games, and we were really fortunate. And this year it's been a little bit different. We have been pretty dominant. You just wonder, when it's going to run out.
And Coach, speaking of when it's going to run out, some people thought it might have run out last year when your running back left, and of course you had a running back fall into your lap this year in Devin Brown, who's a Liberty District Player of the Year, 27 touchdowns. Talk a little bit about getting that player in and kind of what went into that. Sometimes when people hear transfers, they think controversial things, but walk us through that and what went into that. And obviously he's a great pickup.
Well, he was just I'd heard about him a lot from youth leagues, and he was never in our district to come to our school, and so he went to Bishop O'Connell. And to be perfectly honest, I had no idea till late summer that he was even considering coming to Stonebridge, and it was just a decision that he made. He was working with a lot of ex-Redskins who were trying to help him out, and we were very fortunate. He's the hardest working kid you're going to ever find anywhere. And it fits into our schemes, and it gives us a guy that can break it at any time. We've had very good running backs over the years, but never with his kind of, one-play TD type of explosiveness.
Now, Coach, when I talked to you before the season started, when you had a chance to see Brown in practice, you said he was better than you could ever hoped for. Now, with the regular season over, 10-0, 27 touchdowns, what's your opinion of him now?
Oh, it's even higher. He makes plays when he gets the opportunity, and he's never boastful. He works just as hard right now in practice as he did at the beginning, and all the players respect him. He gets along with everybody. Nobody's envious. You couldn't ask for a better kid.
Now, Coach, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do you think you go 10-0 without Walu in your lineup?
Definitely.
That's what I like to hear.
He's a great player, but there are some gaping holes at times, and the thing that he's given us is instead of getting maybe 30 and getting tackled, we're getting 50, 60 and scoring. Now, give us another play and we'll open up the same hole and we'll get another 30 and it's just 2 plays later. Mm-hmm. I do have that kind of attitude. I'm an offensive line guy, and our guys up front are the best. It's the best group I've ever had.
Coach, now obviously 2 years in a row you guys have gone ahead and taken the Liberty District Championship. Can you tell us a little bit, compare to the competition in the Liberty District from last year to this year? Is the Liberty District on the rise? How do you see it from your perspective?
Well, it's really hard to judge. Sometimes I like to think that, we've kind of risen and our play is a lot higher, and then sometimes I think, well, maybe, we're not playing it all that well, and maybe some other people aren't playing as well. It's just really hard to judge. We're having, especially on offense, one of the best seasons I could ever imagine. We rarely punt. I don't know how many times we punted, maybe 7 times the entire year, maybe 5, I don't know. We haven't punted in the last 3 or 4 games, and it's just, it's hard for me to judge, but I think there's good football. I just don't know, how good we are.
And speaking of how good you guys are, Coach, I remember you from back in the day when I was reporting out in Loudoun. And of course, folks at home, you're tuning in just now. We're joined with Coach Mickey Thompson from the Stonebridge Bulldogs football program. Went to the state title game last year, and it looks to be that way again this year. Of course, they have a tough matchup with Madison coming up this week. Coach Thompson, going back to what I was saying earlier about covering you guys out there, you're running an offense that is foreign to a lot of people, but it's pretty basic, but it still seems to work. Talk a little bit about your offense, and it's really caught some other people off guard, especially when you came in your first year. Has it gotten more difficult now in the second year that people have seen it?
Well, actually, it's gotten a little easier because we're able to see what some of the other people are going to do to us. The more athletes you have, the more diverse you can be with it, and the more problems you can cause people. And right now, we're causing people a lot of problems because we can put 5 athletes all over the field, and you can't defend all of them. And that's the biggest thing we've been able to do. Sometimes we've only had 2 or 3 athletes and a couple of role players, and now we have 5 athletes, so we're able to do an awful lot with it.
Speaking of doing an awful lot, you're going to get a chance to see Madison this week in the Division V playoffs. Of course, you're the #1 seed, and Madison just leapfrogged its way in after beating Marshall, and South County lost to West Springfield. You've played Madison and given them fits. You're 3-0 against your good friend from Madison, Gordon Leib. What do you expect to see this time? They put up the most points in your regular season meeting this year than any team has put up against you guys this season. Talk a little bit about what you expect facing the Warhawks.
Well, I definitely didn't want to play them. They pose a lot of problems for us. We don't match up well with them. Their offense is difficult for us. We struggled with them, and then they were able to throw the ball this last time we played. So we definitely. We're definitely not looking past them, and we definitely know that this is going to be a tough game for us. Of all the people in the northern region, that's the one team I would not want to face.
Now, Coach, you mentioned to me earlier that your defensive front has really come up. They've really stepped up and played together as a unit. Do you think that will definitely help you when you go against quarterback Kevin Healy?
Yes, and especially with all the guys they got up front and all the pulling they do and all of that superpower coming off tackle. We've got to have good game by our front people, and I'm hoping that they'll continue their trend. The last couple of weeks, their players really stepped up, and I'm hoping that that carries on through this game because that's a crucial part of defending them.
Coach Thompson, we thank you for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Good luck in the playoffs. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks.
Okay, folks, so you got a chance to hear it from the horse's mouth there. I mean, Mickey Thompson, one of my favorite coaches in this area, of course, all the way out there in Loudoun, and we know this is a Fairfax-based show, but this is a team that is, like you said, last week, Paul, has really kicked the door down and come in and said, this is our region, and they're going for another region title there in the Division V level, and this is a team that, if it stays after being redistricted here 2 years ago, it could continue to dominate. I mean, Coach Thompson runs a single-wing offense over there, which is one of the most difficult things to stop, even though it is so basic. They do have some definite threats. Paul, we'll get a chance to hear both of you guys' expertise when we get into our preview time of the Stonebridge-Madison game. Of course, that would be one of the playoff games that we're going to get a chance to preview for you guys later in the show. Let's jump right into the final standings of the Liberty District. Of course, we want to get a chance to mention some of the other teams from the Liberty. Of course, Stonebridge at 10-0 on the season, clinched its second consecutive Liberty District title. Madison jumps into the playoffs at 7-3. Marshall at 7-3. Mirza, tell us a little bit about the second half of the standings there from Woodson down.
Woodson, of course, having a great season and jumping up from the last year's 3-7. They come to a 5-5 overall record, winning season in the Liberty District with a 4-3 district record. Langley makes a late run with a 4-3 district record, 4-6 overall. McLean had a couple of late wins, 2-5 in the district, 2-8 overall. South Lake started out hot, cooled down a little bit towards the end, 2-8 overall. And Jefferson, without a win in the Liberty District, but still picking up 2 wins early on in the season to go 2-8 overall.
So, of course, you see it right there for yourselves, folks. Stonebridge right up at the top of the Liberty District. And speaking of being at the top of several districts, we have a graphic that we want to flash up on the screen for you to show you what Coach Thompson was talking about, having built a program over there. They did this before coming into the Liberty District. It's a graphic that will show you exactly what they did through the years. We'll start from the bottom. In 2000, they opened their doors for their first season, and they went 3-7 under Thompson, who came over from Park View. originally is where he was coaching. And in 2001, they went just 500, 5-5 in their second season. And of course, no postseason aspirations after that. But then in 2002, you see them make the jump. 10-3, they're the Dulles District champion, and they're the Region 2 champion. Then you go to 2003, the year just right after that. Big year for them, of course, winning their first district title. They win their second consecutive district title. They go to the Region 2 championship, and they're the state runner-up in that AA level of football. 2004, they're 11-1. Of course, they get that third consecutive Dulles District championship. They haven't looked back since. They've continued to win championships. If you look up from the move to AAA cut, from 2004 to 2005, they, of course, won the Liberty District twice. And after, in 2004, when they won the Region 2, they were the runner-up of Region 2, they won the region here in the northern region, and they went to the Division 5 state title game where they lost to Hampton by only a touchdown. Hampton's a team that has won 14 state titles at the Division 5 level. So that's no slouch to lose to. Of course, this year, undefeated Liberty District champions, and we don't know what their finish is yet because, of course, they haven't finished. So my question to you, gentlemen, starting with you, Paul, because you've seen Stonebridge quite a bit this year, and Mears, I believe you've seen Madison. Paul, why will Stonebridge beat Madison?
Well, the key thing is what Coach Thompson did say is that front three for Stonebridge has really come on strong, working together as a unit, and they will pressure quarterback Kevin Healy, and they will tackle Aaron Lambert. They'll get him at the line of scrimmage, and that's going to stop a lot of Madison's offense. Also, they got Jaron Gravea on the outside, really helping with the pass rush, pass coverage. Their defense has really come on strong since the first time they played Madison. Madison did score the most points against them, but it's not going to happen again.
Jaron Gavea, of course, you mentioned, was the district defensive player of the year. So Stonebridge having the offensive and defensive player of the year. Mirza, why do you think Madison could have a shot at winning this game?
Well, it's a tall order for the Warhawks, to go ahead and beat the team that Stonebridge is.
Yeah.
I mean, very dominant team. Madison, like we said, like you've heard a million times, has put up the most points against Stonebridge this season. They're, as Coach Thompson said, they run a type of offense that doesn't suit Stonebridge. Coach Thompson himself didn't want to play them.
Right.
But at the same time, you're talking about how dominant Stonebridge is, and usually you say, can you beat a team twice? In this case, I think you can. But like we said, Madison could have a good run come Friday night.
I do believe that this game will be the hardest game that Stonebridge has during their quest for a repeat district title, a region title.
I talked to Coach Gordon Leib over at Madison after the Marshall victory that got them into the playoffs. Of course, they rode an inside track after West Springfield defeated South County. South County, of course, dropped out of the playoff contention for Division 5. And Madison got into the playoffs. Talked to Coach Gordon Leib, and he said, look, first time, the running back at Stonebridge, and we're going to show you some numbers on him in just a minute. Devin Brown, he calls him number 9, as many coaches call players by their numbers after watching video on them all year long. They let him run loose in the first game that they played them this year. And he said, first time, shame on me. It's not going to happen again. And if I know what Coach Leib is going to do, he's going to run that super power offense. And he's just going to long, sustained drives, and he's just not going to let Stonebridge's offense get on the field. I'm calling the upset right here. I believe Madison takes out Stonebridge in the first week of the playoffs. I really believe that will happen. This isn't just shock value.
That's shocking, then.
That is very shocking and very brave of you. I'd say.
Go ahead.
I'm a brave guy. All right, speaking of brave people and brave teams, we've got the folks that braved their way into the playoffs this year. Let's show you the Division 6 playoff race as we've prepped the Division 5 race. We're going to show you the matchups, of course, that are coming up this week. Westfield will take on the number 4 tied. You see that tie. Robinson did not make the cut. They were tied PowerPoint-wise with Annandale, but of course Annandale clinches because of their district championship in the Patriot District. So Westfield will take on Annandale, and Chantilly and Oakton will be the 2-3 matchup. Oakton will be traveling to Chantilly. Something interesting Mirza mentioned this week was, hey, I wonder who would have gotten in under next year's format. Of course, folks at home, we're talking about next year's playoff race. They will include a 16-team playoff race, 8 teams from each division. Mirza, under this format, Robinson, Herndon, West Potomac, Lake Braddock would have made the playoffs in the Division 6 race.
Yeah, as you can see, they would have, and of course they would have brought up some great matchups for Division VI first week of playoffs. I mean, you would have Westfield facing Herndon, which is a game that, people would really want to see. Chantilly, I think, would actually end up playing Lake Braddock there because West Potomac did beat Lake Braddock during the season. And, Lake Braddock beat Chantilly earlier on in the season, so that's definitely a good game. You have an Oakton West Potomac game. West Potomac is a team that has really stepped it up, winning their last 4 games. So that would be a good game. And Annandale Robinson, I mean, I'd pay money to go see that game any day.
Speaking of paying money to see games, there are some games in the Division V level, Mirza, after prepping for the folks at home, the Stonebridge-Madison game. Tell us who else is in this Division V look.
Well, as you can see above the cut for this year's playoffs, you got Stonebridge, of course, at the top of Division V rating. Yorktown coming through, winning the National District and getting the 2nd place there. And Edison, another National District team, coming in 3rd place. Madison jumping in, like you said, above South County and Marshall after the win over Marshall. Loudoun Valley coming in 7th. Mount Vernon in 8th place in the power ratings. So those teams, if this was next year, would have made the playoffs. But, of course, we're sticking to the top 4 where we have Madison playing at Stonebridge and Edison playing at Yorktown next week.
I just find it interesting that there are going to be some teams in the race next year, and I know I was a proponent of making this 16-team tournament happen. I definitely wanted it to happen. But now, after seeing the math of who would be where, I question that, the validity of the race. It's definitely going to keep it interesting, and for guys like us who write about this stuff all week long, it'll keep some extra teams in it. But there are some teams in there that I wish would have made the playoffs this year, and some teams that I see in there, I say, boy, I wish they wouldn't get in. They just don't deserve it.
Division V, I mean, if you looked at it, you could see that McLean was at the number 9 spot, so they were missing it only by 1 spot, and nothing against the Highlanders. I'm an alumni of the school myself. I wish for them to be in the playoffs.
Right.
But they went 2-8 this year, and they would just have missed the cut. So.
Right. And speaking of teams that went 2-8, of course, talking about in the Liberty District, South Lakes High School struggled a little bit this year. A team that I talked to Coach John Ellenberger this week, and a quick note from him, he will be returning. A lot of times when you have teams that struggle, you got to ask the tough questions, and people get to chattering. And of course, Coach Ellenberger told me he will be back next year. There are some things at South Lakes High School that are out of his control. Numbers issues, getting kids in the door, the renovations that they're doing that hopefully will improve his program and give him a chance to get some more athletes out onto the field. Speaking of getting athletes out onto the field, McLean got some out there this week against Langley after winning 2 straight games. McLean dropped its 9th consecutive rivalry game to crosstown rival Langley in the Rotary Cup. Rotary Cup, of course, is the rivalry game between the 2 teams. Josh Siegel from Langley carried the ball, guys, 46 times.
Oh, wow.
Over 250 yards rushing Siegel had against the rival McLean. His 2nd season going over 1,000 yards rushing. Of course, that line over there makes that quite easy for him. He's a very talented back. 46 carries, it's a school record at Langley High School. So, Josh, you're probably watching us right now in an entire bath of ice. Okay, guys. Speaking of teams that have been in a bath of ice all week long, after every week of football, because they're the big boys in this northern region, Division VI teams, the big hitters, the big boys, and the ones that everybody tunes in every week to hear about. We're talking, of course, about the Concord District. Paul, who's wearing the Concord?
Well, if you throw this graphic up, you'll see we have obviously Westfield on top, 6-0 in the district, 10-0 overall. No surprises there. Chantilly, 4-2, losing their last 2 district games and going 7-3 overall. Robinson missing the cut to make the playoffs at 3-3, 6-4 overall. Oakton coming on strong to make the playoffs, 4-3, 5-5 overall. Herndon 3-4, 6-4 overall. Centerville with the win over Chantilly makes them 2-4 in the district, 6-4 overall. And Fairfax didn't get a district win, but notched 1 win overall at 1-9.
Okay, guys, so of course Oakton would be in 3rd place in this Concord district, and of course they leapfrog to get into the playoffs. That's a team I want to talk about right at the top of the Concord district. This is a team that I watched grow with every single game last year. It is the biggest mistake that they got into the playoffs, and I don't mean that it's a mistake that their points put them there. What I mean is for the rest of the teams in the Concord district and in this region to allow the returning state champion after struggling this year to get into the playoffs is a mistake on the other team's part. This is a team that once they build momentum and steam, that's what they did through the entire playoff race last year. Keith Payne, who of course is redshirting running back at UVA right now, did not become the Keith Payne that we know him to be now until the region final against Westfield when he ran for 5 touchdowns and over 250 yards. So you let this team in now. You've let a sleeping giant into the playoffs. I really believe it was a major mistake on the rest of the Concord District to allow that team in. Now, what do I mean by a mistake? Of course, it's not their fault. Oakton won a couple of games. They won the games they needed to win to get in. Of course, playing in the tough district and getting those power points. We showed the folks at home last week Oakton's powerful schedule and what put them in. On the other hand of that, Paul, a team that already beat Oakton is Chantilly, and that's who they'll be taking on in the first week of the playoffs at Chantilly. Why, Paul Frummelt? Why, Paul Frummelt? In the FSN Game of the Week,
there you go.
Will Chantilly beat Oakton?
Well, you said it before. They beat Oakton 21-0. That's not just a squeaker. They crushed Oakton 21-0. And sure, maybe Oakton's coming on stronger, but Chantilly's also learning. They have 2 straight losses in a row. One to Westfield. Westfield's undefeated in the district, so that's not a surprise. Then one to Centerville, and Chantilly just can't seem to beat Centerville. They have 2 straight district losses. They're going to be hopping mad. They may have lost twice in a row, but Chantilly's still a good 7-1 team that we saw before those games. 21-0. It's, I mean, I can't see Oakton overcoming Chantilly.
And I do. And I'll tell you why.
Go ahead. No,
because
go ahead.
I was at the Oakton-Chantilly game last time.
Okay.
And Oakton was just stagnant. They're a team that has been up and down this year, and they just had a bad day. But I will not take anything away. I wrote about this game, and I gave the props to the people that deserved them, and that, of course, was the Chantilly defense. Austin Morris lit up Jared Green across the middle. I'm not calling you out, Jared, but it happened. I also give you props, Jared, when you make one-handed catches in those Oakton games. So the props go both ways. But Austin Morris is a guy that hits hard. Hopefully they'll have him back for the playoff race at Chantilly. Austin Cross is a guy that is a good running back over at Chantilly. And, of course, you have Nate Warwick. Mirza, you've gotten a chance to see some of these teams. Chantilly loses to Westfield, then Centerville to end their regular season and makes the playoffs. It's a bit of a letdown going into the playoff race, don't you think?
Definitely. I think it is. As far as the Chantilly-Oakton game goes, I think Oakton has history on its side. Like you said, they steamroll into the playoffs. They peak at the right moment. Now this time they might have left it for a little bit too late because they barely got into the playoffs. They had to wait till that last week. But once again, they peaked at almost the right moment. Chantilly, on the other end, seems to be going the other way. At first they were only giving up less than a touchdown a game, and then they get lit up against Robinson, even though they won the game. Then it was the Westfield. Then it was Centerville. I think they're just burned out at this point. Don't want to take any credit away from Chantilly. Great season, everything, but I think Oakton takes this one.
Well, look at these offenses. Look at Robinson with the Meyer boys. Obviously a great team. Westfield, how much more can you say about Glennon? And Centerville, say what you will, I mean, they only won 2 district games, but they have powerhouse offensive players. And when you get something like that, I mean, sure, Chantilly did win the game against Robinson. They found a way to win, and their offense is coming on. Yeah, they had 3 weeks where offenses scored some points on them. Those are the best offenses in the region.
Well, if Coach Mike Lally, who has been on this show with us this year, is watching, I hope he's not going to hold it against me after the game. Of course, I'll be approaching him to interview him, whether he wins or loses that game. But Coach Lally doing a heck of a job in his second year, 11-9 overall, one of the winningest coaches now in his tenure as an active coach, makes that top 10 list. Okay, the FSN Game of the Week will be Oakton at Chantilly, or the Division 6 2 and 3 matchup. Mirza, a team that is not in the playoffs this year, and it breaks a bit of a streak for the Robinson Rams.
Definitely, first time since 1998 that the Rams are not in the playoffs. And I had the pleasure of watching them a couple of times this year, including the last game against Westfield. And I approached Coach Bendorf after the game to talk to him about it, and he said, it's a little bit unfamiliar. He is a coach that likes to start his next season immediately after meeting with the underclassmen right afterwards, what have you. But he can't help it. It was a team that had lost 18 starters from last year. I talked to Mike Meyer after the game, the senior running back at Robinson, and said, it hurts, but we did everything we could.
Yeah.
And they were alive until the very last drive of their season, and that's a credit to them. I think, even though like I said, they've lost 18 starters from last year. That's a huge hit to take for the Rams. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't come over that last hump, and they lost 4 games in the season, and all 4 of them by a touchdown or less.
Speaking of losing a lot of kids, Centerville lost some kids from last year. Drew Dudzik, Cameron Dose, some players that are playing at the Division I AA level right now at William & Mary is Dose, and of course Dudzik is the quarterback over at JMU, and I expect big things out of Drew. His dad, a former quarterback at JMU, not a lot of people know that, hitting you with some knowledge, Fairfax. Okay, but speaking of Centerville, and of course Herndon, a team that caught on late. Herndon is a team that won its last 3 games to see Coach Tommy Meyer off in his last game coaching against Fairfax this past week. We're losing 2 coaches in the Concord District, guys, that have been fixtures in this region for quite some time. Of course, Coach Mike Skinner, 87-26 at Centerville, and was 3rd as the most winningest active region coach with a 769 winning percentage. And of course, Tommy Meyer over at Herndon was 9th in 17 years as an active coach, was 9th overall in active coaching's winning percentage with a 586 winning percentage at 115-81. Some big shoes to fill for whoever takes over those roles, and we know that there's going to be some people out there gunning for those jobs. So, speaking of doing a good job, Mirza, you've done an incredible job covering the Patriot District. It has been more than just a fun year, and some teams that, of course, have some playoff implications there. Take away the Patriot District's final standings. Who ended up where, Mirza?
Definitely. You will see in a second here with a graphic that we're going to throw up with the standings. As you can see, 6-4, 4 teams won 6-4 overall in the Patriot District this year. You have Annandale and West Potomac going 6-1, battling it out for the title there. Lake Braddock 4-3 in the district. Lee 4-3 in the district. South County with a late faltering there with a 3-4. West Springfield coming on strong at the end to go 3-4 in the district. T.C. Williams, a team that had a quiet season this year, 2-5 in the district, but 4-6 overall. And of course, Hayfield, as we always say, struggling with the numbers issue after South County opening up. Winless this season, 0-7 in the district and 0-10 overall.
Well, speaking of the Patriot District, Mirza, Annandale is a team that, of course, finished 6-1 and won its second, I believe, consecutive district title. It's a team that I saw with quarterback Nathan Cartagena play against Oakton in the first round last year. They're a team that can give Westfield a fit, and of course, that will be the first round of the Division VI region playoff. Annandale will be traveling to Westfield. Of course, a battle of 2 different style of quarterbacks. Mike Glennon, a drop-back classic quarterback from Westfield with a gun arm. And then you've got your scrambling, running kind of guy, a la kind of like a Steve Young kind of guy in Nathan Cartagena over at Annandale. Mirza, why will Westfield win this game?
Westfield is likely going to take this game just because, like I said about Oakton, history is on their side. They went 10-0 this year. They're 48-2 in the last 5 regular seasons. Wow. They've played Annandale before, 34-7 win for Westfield. But, and it's a big but, Cartagena is, he's an unbelievable player who can run all over you if you let him. Will Westfield be able to contain him again? I don't know. We'll see.
Paul?
Well, they didn't contain him the first time per se when they played in the regular season, but they still won. And that was Westfield in the beginning of the season, which they are 10 times better now. They found ways to win beginning of the season. Now they're just blowing people out and just winning straight up. They didn't contain, I don't think anybody can contain Cartagena, but they can minimize the damage, and that's what they'll be able to do. I think this is going to be the closest game out of the playoffs, but I think Westfield wins.
I don't say, and I just disagree with you there. I think it's going to go one of 2 ways.
Okay.
It's either going to be an Annandale upset or a Westfield blowout. I can't see it being a close game. I know that Annandale played Oakton very close last week, 20-10, but I think Westfield has been a team that has gotten by this year. They've won the games they've had to win. I haven't seen them win impressively at any moment.
But they win.
But they win, and that's also a sign of a good team. So in a different respect, I think that they have that going for them as well. They've pulled out the tough victories. Speaking of pulling out tough victories, Mirza, West Potomac won its last 4 games here and has really made a bid for respect in that district. Talk a little bit about what West Potomac was able to do in the last parts of the season here.
Definitely. The Wolverines, they came on. And halfway through the season, everybody had them written off except for the Wolverines. And they said, we're sick of it. We want some respect. They went through for 4 straight victories to finish 6-4 in the season, 6-1 in the Patriot District. They were contenders for that title. They lost it because they lost to Annandale head-to-head. They have a lot of people returning next year, and I was talking to Coach Pete Bendorf over at South County, who says West Potomac is probably the most likely team to win the Patriot District next year.
Wow.
Because they have so many people returning. Of course, they're losing their quarterback in Chris Farquhar, who's had an unbelievable, not just season, but a career over at West Potomac. But they're returning a whole lot of players, including their running back, Josh Wells, who's run all over teams this year.
Speaking of guys that ran all over teams this year and last year, a guy named Titus Pennington from South County had a tough week this past week. But Mirza, you say there might be a reason for that.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, Titus, in the game against Hayfield, actually limped off because he had strained his hamstring. He was used sparingly against West Potomac, and once again, sparingly against West Springfield. He, it kind of makes the South County Stallions a little one-dimensional when you lose a guy like that. But he is returning next year. So is Chris Mitchell, the other running back.
Wow.
This is a team that, they were going really strong for a while, but it seems like they burned out towards the end to lose those last 2 games to West Potomac, like we said, and West Springfield. They had a great stretch in the middle there where they beat both Edison and Annandale, both playoff teams this year. And they played very impressive games, but then at the end, they just burned out and they gave up a whole lot of points in the last 2 games of the season.
And similar to that is another team from the Patriot District that you got a chance to cover. It was a team that we talked a lot about at the beginning of the season because they got so hot out of the gates, and they don't usually do that. Lee came back to earth a little bit, though, didn't they? Yeah,
they ended up losing the last 3 games of the season, and I think injuries had a lot to do with that. Their main playmakers ended up being used sparingly. Like I said about Titus Pennington for South County, at Lee you had Chris O'Turson, the quarterback, who couldn't run the option as well as he could before because of an ankle injury. And then you had Brandon Cameron as well, not being able to hit the holes as hard as he can because of some injuries that came up. The Lancers, unfortunately for them, 2 weeks before the end of the season, they were contenders for the Patriot title, for the playoff spot, but they ended up losing to Annandale, losing the Patriot title contention, and then being shut down by Lake Braddock at the end of the season there in the last game to lose 3 in a row.
And on the flip side of that, you talk about a Lake Braddock team that did win that game, and they kind of rallied late.
Definitely. I mean, if it wasn't for the loss to Robinson, they would have made a huge impact at the end of the season, and they were still in the contention for Division VI playoff berth, which we haven't heard from Lake Braddock in a couple of years now. You're looking at a team that 2 years ago went 0-10, and then Coach Jim Poitras, after that first tough year, he didn't give in, he didn't throw in the towel, he got the team rolling again. 6-4 last year, 6-4 this year. I think things would have been a lot more different had he had Jordan Russell on his side. Of course, the running back that ran for 1,500 yards last year, this year injured the entire season, and I think that makes a huge difference for the Bruins.
Well, speaking of making a difference, there's a guy that we had on our show a couple of weeks ago named Peter Lalich. Lalick, I'm going to get that right one of these days. Peter Lalick that will be headed to UVA, and we got a chance to talk to him a little bit about some of the teams left on their schedule, and he said that South County was a team that was really gunning for West Springfield, and of course they were gunning for South County. Lalick had an impressive day against South County in the last week of the season. They put up 45 points against South County, or somewhere in that range, over 40 points against South County. Lalick, of course, had an impressive day and finished his career. By the way, guys, let's talk a little bit about his career. He was on the show, and we did put a graphic up, but his final numbers for his career, 6,145 yards, 60 touchdowns, and these are just passing, 62% completion percentage, and he completed 438 of 706 attempts. His career yards per game, 245.8 in 25 games. 3,134 yards in his senior season ranks Lalich 5th all-time in the category. He also did that in just 10 games. Most of the other guys ranked ahead of him, 1 through 4, of course, all did it in over 12 games. Of course, 3 of the 4 guys that did it above him did it in 14 games. So Lalick, a guy that did that in just 10 games, you do the math on how many that was per game this season. 438 completions in his career ranks him 5th in that category, and 200 completions in his senior year also ranks him 5th in that per season category. He had 8 touchdown passes against Hayfield, which was a record breaker as well that ranked him second all-time in the category. And he had 33 touchdown passes. So and I could go on and on. The sheet actually has like 5 more things I could say about him. 452 yards passing this past week. So he's a guy that UVA is definitely getting a good package on.
Definitely. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. You don't have to tell the people how good Lalick is. You just heard those numbers. That's all you have to say. And of course, UVA very lucky to be getting him. And all we could do is wish him the best of luck next year.
Well, we can say we discovered him here on the Fairfax Sports Report.
He was sitting in this chair.
Okay, guys. Speaking of the playoff race, of course, West Springfield spoiled that for South County. But I want to show you the final PowerPoint rankings on the season and, of course, the playoff matchups for the Division VI race. Of course, we're talking about this upcoming Friday when the Fairfax Sports Network's Game of the Week will be Oakton at Chantilly. And then, of course, you will have Annandale tied for 4th, but still gets that berth with a Patriot District title. They will be playing Westfield. And, of course, you see the next 4 teams there that would have made it if this were next year. And, of course, we're not quantum leaping, so this is not next year. Gentlemen, I would like Mirza to please take it away for the Division 5.
Well, you're going to see the Division 5. There it is, rankings again for the end of the season. Stonebridge obviously taking the cake there. Yorktown coming in second. Edison in the 3rd place. Madison jumping above to get the playoff spot. South County and Marshall being forced out of the playoff spot. Loudoun Valley, Mount Vernon. McLean coming in 9th place with Wakefield. And South Lakes finishing 10th and final places.
Well, guys, it's been an interesting season, of course, and we want to jump into the National District before we get going here. Mirza, tell us who did what in the final weeks of the season for the National District, and, of course, show us those final standings.
Well, there's the final standings, as you can see. Of course, this has been a much more interesting National District than we've seen in many years. Yorktown coming in with a 9-1 overall record, 6-1 in the district and winning the district as the champions. Edison coming in with the same 6-1 record, 8-2 overall. Loudoun Valley finishing 6-4, which is a much different story than last year, 5-2 in the district. Mount Vernon going 5-5, 4-3 in the district. Falls Church 3-4, 3-7 overall. Washington Lee winning 2 games, they're going 2-8. Wakefield 3 games, 3-7, and Stewart winless this year. Of course, like we mentioned a few weeks ago, last year, the National District had 3 teams that went 1-9. This year, a different story.
It's definitely a different story, but what's not a different story is Edison and Yorktown in the playoffs from that district. And, of course, those are the teams that made the playoffs last year from that district. Mirza, give us the inside scoop on Yorktown versus Edison. Of course, that's a game, I believe that's going to be at Yorktown. Why can Edison march in there and take that game, or can they?
Definitely. Well, I think Edison can. And this is another game, like we said earlier, Stonebridge, Madison playing each other for the second time this season. And you have Yorktown and Edison playing each other second time this season. I think these are 2 much more closely matched teams than Madison and Stonebridge, excuse me. Yorktown, they have a great running back in Maximilian there who's very tough and very hard to handle. But you have an Edison team that has very many playmakers who are very good at what they do, including Sean Lloyd at quarterback, who's shown great strength in his arm and great leadership. And, you ask again, can a team beat another team twice? And in this case, I don't think Coach Von Lewis of Edison allows Yorktown another victory. I see the Eagles going to the final.
Well, and interesting from that race, depending on who takes on who in the next week of the Division 5 region title game, that could be interesting either way. Any one of those teams is a legitimate regional contender, and I like to see Yorktown, of course, charging up and getting into the playoffs. That's a team that I slept on this year. I'll admit it straight up. I can tell you that's a team that came out of nowhere for me. I didn't see them on the radar. I don't think many people did. But yeah, props to the Patriots over there at Yorktown. Guys, let's jump back into the playoff race here real quick. Want to get your thoughts. I know we've kind of been here and there on who's going to win. Who is going all the way to the state tournament from the Division 6 level, Mirza Krispahich?
Going to go with Oakton. I'm going to change my mind.
You guys.
I think, at first I was counting Oakton out of the playoff race altogether, but after the Rams dropped off, I I think Oakton is picking up pace, peaking at the right time, and I see them upsetting Westfield in the final.
Paul, you're going to say Westfield,
Well,
aren't
no,
you?
here's the sane answer. This is the answer that makes sense.
Has the Concord made sense this year?
That's true, so I'm
Okay.
probably wrong, so,
But
so
just
don't
remember
listen.
what we said in the beginning of the year.
Don't listen to
Each
anything
one
I
of us.
said. But here's what makes sense. Westfield beats Annandale, obviously. Chantilly beats Oakton. Westfield beats Chantilly. Done. Put it in the books. You don't even have to play the games.
All right, well, you heard it here, folks. Let's just go home now. Forget it. We don't even need it. All right, let's do the same thing. I'm gonna give you my picks when we're done here because they'll, of course, be the right picks. So I just want to let you guys go ahead and get your shot at maybe saying something
He just got confident because he
coherent.
got the pick'ems at the end there.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
on
Of course,
strong.
if you've been watching and reading the Connection newspapers this year, of course, that is where all three of us are sports editors. You will see our pick'ems that we've been picking all year, and I, of course, took fourth in that poll.
Second to last.
Where did you guys end up on that?
Second to last.
I had to risk it all, and I took a dive. I took a dive, I'll admit it.
I was just wondering. Of course, you can read everything that we write, in-depth coverage of all your favorite teams on the ConnectionNewspapers.com. We will be watching these playoffs intently. And, of course, you can see more about the upcoming game of the week and give us your feedback on the website, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Okay, guys, let's do Division 5, same way. Mirza, Division 5 state title winner.
State title, well, Edison.
Wow.
Eagles.
He goes against the grain.
I have to this time. You know, that's what I did the final week of the pick'ems too. I fell hard
that
there.
turned out.
Sorry, Edison, you'll be
No,
staying home
I
next week.
believe in the Eagles. I think they're gonna have a hard time against Yorktown and gonna have a hard time against Stonebridge. But they're a team that's shown that they can, overcome and survive these hard times that they have.
Pablo,
You ready for my sane answer?
give me the breakdown.
Okay, so Stonebridge beats Madison, obviously. Now, I like Edison.
Whoa. Just like that? It's that easy? They just march through Madison?
Yes.
I
Well,
don't know.
Madison's tough. I told you, that's the hardest game they play in the regional playoffs. They beat Madison. I believe Edison will take down Yorktown, and then Stonebridge beating Edison, taking the regional championship, on their way to the state title. Nice.
Okay, so you're the one that's the sane one.
Uh-huh.
Well, unfortunately, you're not. Mirza is the only one that is sane here, having said that Oakton could march all the way through to the region title. I believe that. I saw them do it last year. I know this isn't last year, but I know what that program is capable of doing once it gets into the playoffs. Big mistake for the rest of the Division 6 region, allowing Oakton to get into the playoffs. They let a sleeping giant or wake a sleeping giant or whatever
Westfield
you
and
want to say.
Chantilly beat them, so,
So
they
hey,
weren't letting them.
it's going to be an interesting race no matter what, folks. And of course, on the Division 5 side, I know a lot of people are writing off Madison from this race, and of course, Edison and Yorktown. All four of those teams are viable contenders. Of
Very
course,
good teams.
Of course, Stonebridge as well. I'll tell you why Madison could win that football game. Gordon Leib. Long, sustained drives. They're going to keep that Stonebridge offense off the field. I'm calling the
How could they
upset
do
right
that?
now. Madison will beat Stonebridge. Mickey Thompson, thanks for joining us on the Fairfax Sports Report. Good friend of mine for quite some time. But next time we're on this show,
He's not going to answer our calls.
no. next time we're on this show, I'll get to stand a little taller for having called that. And of course, I owe the Warhawks a game for having having picked against them in our Connection Pigskin and picked Marshall this past week.
Do they win the final though?
Boy, I don't know if I could take the Warhawks that far, but I know I believe they're going to beat Stonebridge. We'll take it week to week, and we'll see.
Well, let's forget about how far you can take them. Let's see how far Gordon Live can take them.
Absolutely.
Could they beat Yorktown or Edison?
It's all possible at this level. That's what's so great about the playoffs, and of course, all you Northern Region fans out there know that. That's why you tune in week to week on the Fairfax Sports Report to get our analysis, which of course means absolutely nothing because we've been wrong all year. But of course, that's why you go to those games, and that's why it's so interesting. Folks, we want to, of course, thank the people that make this show possible, and of course, we're talking about our underwriters. Of course, we're talking about CCI Screen Printing, but before we thank them, we want to let you know that the FSN Game of the Week will be, of course, this week, as it's been every week. Oakton at Chantilly. That's the semifinals. Oakton will be taking on the Chargers. We've given you a great preview of that game. Folks, get out to that game if you can. It's some great high level of football, and it's going to be exciting either way. The FSN Game of the Week will re-air on Channel 10 This week you'll see Westfield at Chantilly. It was taped on November 3rd. Runs Saturday at 4:30 and Monday at 3:30 on Cox and Comcast Channel 10. Of course, you'll be watching that after we see the playoffs this week. So you'll get your fix of Chantilly. We're on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Beautiful photo galleries. You can read all about Paul Frummelt's life and his journey. And, of course, you can read about Mirza Krispahich, one of our finer reporters at our newspaper. CCI Screen Printing, we really want to thank you for being our teammate, team captain at times. CCI Screen Printing.
10 yards.
They do, they definitely do. They're 703-978-0257. And then you have Quality Care Ford Service Center, another teammate, one you can always rely on, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And folks at home, we got a couple of minutes here. Just wanted to let you guys know that we've definitely appreciated your viewership over the last couple of weeks, and of course through football. We're going to be taking a break next week. Of course, if you'll tune in, you'll still see some coverage of your local teams. Just will not be something as fresh. But we're going to hit you hard when we come back with basketball. We'll be doing our preview soon. It's going to be a lot on the Fairfax Sports Network coming up. Of course, check us out on the website. We also want to get a chance to thank Mirza Krispahich, who's been reporting with us since the beginning of the summertime and has done an incredible job. He's, of course, going to be moving on to take on the Reston reporting beat, and he's going to be moving into the more serious side of things. He's going to be a big newsman, so he leaves us young men behind to wallow around in our sorrow of immaturity.
Maybe more serious, but not more important.
I like it.
That's a good line. I like that.
He comes up with this stuff.
We'll have to use that. See, we have to write this stuff down.
He
It's
writes
classic.
the news.
Let's get that for his highlight reel. But yeah, of course, want to thank Mirza for everything he's done for the Connection newspapers and the Fairfax Sports Network. Don't rule him out just yet. Of course, when it's soccer time, we're going to see him and his smiling face covering all your local teams. We're going to try to put him back to work, even though he's leaving us. Thanks for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report on the Fairfax Sports Network.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have been informed